In 1985, my husband left me for a girl who was 24 years old. I was 39. He looked me in the eye and told me he didn't love me anymore. He packed a suitcase and walked out the door while our children were still finishing their breakfast. My son had jelly on his chin. My youngest daughter was asking me for help tying her shoes. He didn't say goodbye to them, just closed the door and drove off with someone who didn't even know how to raise a plant, let alone a family. We had 3 children. I raised every one of them by myself. I cleaned office buildings at night while they slept in the backseat of my car, wrapped in blankets, waiting for me to finish mopping floors. There were nights I worked until 3 in the morning, came home to make their lunches, and sent them off to school without closing my eyes once. I never asked for help. I never expected him to come back. Last month, a 17-year-old girl called me. Her name was Alina Ray. She said she was Marius's granddaughter, the daughter of the baby he had with the woman he left me for. She told me they were having a family reunion next weekend and wanted me to come. She said, "I know this might feel strange, but I've heard about you. You were part of this family once. Would you consider joining us?" I asked for her address. She sounded surprised but gave it. She didn't know what I was going to send. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the same mop I used during those nights in the 80s and 90s. The handle was still chipped from when it fell down the church stairs in 94. The head was frayed but intact. I laid it on the kitchen table and took a picture of it under the overhead light. Then I wrote a note and tucked it into an envelope. The note said, "This built your bloodline." Then I mailed it to her. That mop, that handle, that frayed piece of cotton, that's what held 3 children together after a man decided he didn't have room for them anymore. That's what paid for braces, school lunches, winter coats, electricity, and gas money. It cleaned bathrooms that people left filthy without a second thought. It soaked in my sweat, my tears, my desperation, and my grit. I never remarried. I never stopped working. I never chased after the man who ran away. I built a life, one shift at a time. My children were my only priority, and I gave them everything I had, whether I had much or not. So when his granddaughter called me, his legacy, I didn't get angry. I didn't scream or hang up. I didn't even feel bitter. I felt steady. I wanted her to see the truth for herself. You can't build a bloodline on charm, on easy love, or on abandoning the people who depend on you. But you can build it with your bare hands, with tired feet, and with a mop that sees more of your life than any man ever did. So I sent her the photo. I sent her the message. I wanted her to understand. The foundation of her family wasn't made by the man who gave her last name. It was built by the woman he left behind. That's who I am. I'm Alara Mae Calden, and this is my story. I was born and raised in Western Kentucky in a house that smelled like cornbread and fresh laundry. My mother, Norna, was a quiet woman who taught me how to stand tall even when life bent you low. My father, Eden, was a mechanic with rough hands and a soft voice. He used to call me the calm in the storm when I was little. I think he saw something in me I didn't understand until much later. I met Marius when I was 19. He was charming and reckless in a way that made him seem exciting. He had a crooked smile and a motorcycle he couldn't afford. He told me I was the only girl who made him think about staying in one place. I was working as a cashier at a local grocery store. He'd come in for soda and sunflower seeds and always leave with a joke or a wink. We got married the following spring. I wore my sister's borrowed dress and my mother's pearl earrings. We didn't have much, but it felt like we had everything. We moved into a small rental house on West Bixby Road. The paint on the walls was chipped and the plumbing was fussy, but I scrubbed that place top to bottom and made it our home. I painted the nursery yellow before we even knew if our first baby would be a boy or a girl. Leora was born during a thunderstorm. She had a voice like a firecracker. 2 years later, Dax came along, quiet and wide-eyed. Sari arrived 3 years after that, always singing to herself or scribbling in the corners of books. They were the rhythm of my life. I ironed their clothes before school, braided their hair, patched holes in jeans, packed peanut butter sandwiches and apples with notes that said, "Mama loves you more than the sky." Marius opened a small auto repair shop with a loan from his cousin. He had skill, I'll give him that. People trusted him with their engines and their cash. At home, though, he started pulling away. At first, it was subtle. He came home later. He stopped asking about my day. He spent more time in the garage, less time with the kids. He missed Leora's third-grade play. He forgot our anniversary. I told myself it was stress. I told myself it was a phase. My mother passed in the summer of '84. She had a stroke while planting petunias. She died with dirt under her fingernails and a prayer on her lips. I remember standing in her kitchen that day, looking at the empty mug she'd left by the sink, and feeling like a door had closed behind me. My father, Eden, couldn't live alone, so we moved him into assisted housing nearby. He kept a photo of my mother on his nightstand and kissed it every night. That kind of love leaves a mark. I wondered why I hadn't felt that kind of devotion from Marius in years. By 1985, the silence in our house was louder than any argument could have been. Marius stopped touching me, stopped looking at me. He answered questions with one-word replies. He was there, but not really. I found a receipt in his jacket pocket from a motel on Route 6. I didn't confront him. I didn't have the strength yet. Then one morning in June, while the kids were at the table eating cereal and watching cartoons, he came in with a duffel bag. His eyes didn't meet mine. "I'm leaving," he said. I stood by the sink, hands wet from rinsing dishes. "For how long?" I asked. "For good," he said. "Her name's Bessie. I'm in love with her." He walked past the children who didn't understand what was happening. Dax asked if Daddy was going on a trip. Marius didn't respond. He stepped outside, got in his truck, and drove away. That was the moment everything split. I didn't scream. I didn't cry in front of the kids. I walked into the bathroom, shut the door, and let my knees hit the tile. I felt like I was sinking underwater. Not drowning, just sinking slowly into something cold and permanent. I couldn't call my mother. I couldn't run to my father. All I had was 3 children who still needed lunch packed and teeth brushed. That night, I went back to work at the elementary school library. I stayed late, alphabetizing the nonfiction section until my fingers ached. I walked home in the dark and sat at the kitchen table staring at the empty chair across from me. I told myself the truth. He wasn't coming back. I was on my own. But I wasn't really alone. I had Leora, I had Dax, I had Sari, and I still had my hands. I still had my will. That had to be enough. The first Monday after Marius left, I walked to the school district office and asked if there were any night cleaning positions available. The woman at the desk blinked at me. I was wearing a pressed blouse and heels, holding a folder with my librarian credentials. She glanced down at it and said, "You're looking for janitorial work?" I nodded. "Whatever hours you've got, I'll take them." That Friday, I started my first shift at an office building downtown. It was quiet, polished, and full of glass I couldn't afford to break. The air smelled like stale coffee and furniture polish. I was given a plastic cart with rags, a mop, and a key ring that jingled like a warning bell. I'd never scrubbed urinals before. I'd never emptied bins filled with chewed gum and soggy paper towels. But I did that night. Every surface I touched felt like a wall I had to climb to keep my children safe. I got home at 2:30 in the morning, my back stiff and fingers raw. Leora had stayed up to wait for me. She sat at the kitchen table with a peanut butter sandwich cut in half, one piece for me. "You shouldn't be awake," I said. "I wanted to see if you were okay." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." "I'll get there," I said. "We all will." The next few weeks were a blur of motion. I'd clean offices from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., come home, make breakfast, and get the kids ready for school. I napped in the car while waiting for Sari's classes to end. I missed school conferences, soccer practices, and one of Dax's photography exhibits. I hated that part. But I told myself the only thing worse than missing those moments was losing our home. The bills stacked up faster than I could keep up. Marius stopped paying child support after the second month. I called him once. He didn't answer. I sent a letter. It came back unopened. Leora asked why Daddy didn't send birthday cards anymore. I told her he was busy. That lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Dax became quieter. He spent hours in the backyard with my old film camera, photographing shadows and broken fences. I found one picture he had taken of me through the kitchen window. I was slumped over the sink, hands limp. He'd written the word "still" on the back of the photo. That word broke me more than any bill collector ever could. Sari, just 8 years old, began writing strange little stories. One was about a woman who turned into a washing machine because no one heard her cry. Another was about a house that whispered secrets to children when the adults weren't listening. She gave me one of her stories as a birthday gift. It was called The Queen of Mops. Leora, always the fiercest, became angry at teachers, at me, at the world. One night, I caught her stuffing clothes into a backpack. "Where do you think you're going?" I asked. "I'm going to find him," she snapped. "He doesn't just get to vanish. He doesn't get to leave us like we're garbage." I held her by the shoulders. "You think I don't feel the same way? You think I don't want to scream at him every day? But I can't, Leora. I don't have time to scream. I have to work. I have to pay rent. I have to keep this family upright." She cried into my shirt for a long time. I just stood there holding her, swaying back and forth like I used to when she was a baby. That winter, the car broke down. I had no money for repairs, so I walked. 4 miles each way to the office building. In the snow, in the rain, in boots with worn-out soles. One night, the supervisor offered me a ride home. He was kind, asked about my kids, told me I was doing something incredible. I thanked him and declined the ride. I didn't want to owe anyone, not even kindness. I found out through a neighbor that Marius had moved 2 towns over and opened a new shop. He was living with Bessie in a split-level house with a white picket fence. They had a baby girl and a Labrador named Henry. They were in the town newsletter. He looked happy in the photo. I stared at that newsletter for a long time. Then I folded it, dropped it in the trash, and went to scrub the kitchen floor. My house, my kids, my battle. No one was coming to save us. And somehow, I was okay with that. Because little by little, we were learning how to save ourselves. That mop became my sword. That cart became my chariot. And the fluorescent light that hummed in every silent building I cleaned became a strange kind of spotlight. Not for applause, but for endurance. Every night, I told myself, "You're still here. Keep going." And I did. It was a Thursday night in March when something changed in me. I had just finished cleaning the break room at a medical supply office downtown. The floor was covered in dried coffee stains, and the edge of the trash bin had melted slightly, leaving a sharp lip that had already cut my knuckle once that week. The mop water was dark gray. My hands were raw. I sat down on the cold tile floor beside the supply closet, leaned back against the wall, and closed my eyes. I was tired, not in the way a good night's sleep could fix, but in a way that felt like it lived in my bones. I had just turned 40. I couldn't remember the last time I looked in the mirror and saw anything other than duty in my face. Then I heard a sound, a laugh, faint and tinny, coming from one of the break room radios left on by accident. Someone's voice came through it, cheerful and hollow. I couldn't make out the words, but the laughter made me think about how long it had been since I'd laughed without forcing it, since I'd felt anything that didn't come with a burden attached. I pulled my coat tighter and stared at the mop leaning against the wall, the same mop I'd been using for nearly 4 years. The handle was worn smooth where my hands always gripped it. The cloth head was stained permanently around the edges. It had become a symbol of everything I'd done to keep my family afloat. That mop had seen me at my weakest, but it had also helped me survive. Something broke open in my chest. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed in, deep and sharp, and said out loud to no one, "This is not going to be the end of me." That was the moment I stopped working just to survive. I started working with purpose. I took control. I didn't have money. I didn't have connections. But I had 3 children who still looked at me with hope in their eyes. I was going to give them something more than just survival. I was going to build a foundation that couldn't be cracked by anyone walking away. The next morning, I called the school principal where I had once been a librarian. I asked if they had any openings, even part-time, in administration or support. He said no. I asked him to keep my name on file anyway. Then I called the district's adult education program. I signed up for weekend business classes. I went after my second shift on Saturdays, dragging myself into a small classroom filled with exhausted faces like mine. We sat there learning about budgeting, small business planning, and managing employees. I barely understood the math at first, but I stayed after class. I asked questions. I did homework on my lunch breaks. I also brought the kids into my world. I stopped trying to shield them from my struggle and started making them part of the solution. Leora learned how to change light bulbs and clean glass without streaks. Dax learned how to manage my cleaning supply orders. Sari wrote a flyer that read, "Hardworking mama for hire, floors, offices, homes. We show up. We stay late. We don't cut corners." We made 20 copies and put them on every laundromat bulletin board in town. Clients came. Slowly at first, but then more steadily. One older couple said they hired me because my kids came to the door and shook their hands like professionals. Another woman said she liked how I didn't apologize for being tired. I was proud of that. I got a call from an office park supervisor offering me my own small cleaning contract, 3 buildings, 6 nights a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I opened a bank account with Leora. I showed her how to track deposits and write checks. I kept all receipts in a shoebox with better days written on the side. Every decision I made now came from a place of intention. I started to say no when I had to. I declined extra shifts that overlapped with the kids' milestones. I was still cleaning toilets, but now I was doing it on my terms. I had value, not just because I worked hard, but because I believed my labor meant something. One Sunday, I came home from class to find Sari in the living room with scissors, paper, and glue. She had made a poster of me. It showed me holding a mop like a scepter, with the words, "Queen of Clean, Builder of Kingdoms." I laughed, and it didn't feel forced. That poster hung in our hallway for the next 15 years. In the hardest years of our life, we found a way not just to survive, but to build. We built small victories. We built trust. We built pride. And for the first time since Marius walked out, I didn't feel left behind. I felt like I was finally walking forward. I hadn't spoken to Marius in over 30 years. After he left, there were no holiday calls, no birthday cards for the kids, no visits. When he did send child support, it was brief and inconsistent. Then it stopped altogether. It was like he erased us from his life with the same casual ease he used to close a door behind him. The kids grew up. Leora became a nurse. Dax turned his photography into a career and traveled across 3 continents before settling in Oregon. Sari teaches high school English now and still writes those strange, beautiful stories. They all built lives rooted in strength. Not bitterness, not anger, but strength. One Wednesday morning, I was drinking tea on the back porch when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I thought it might be a doctor's office or one of those scam calls. I almost didn't pick up, but I did. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was soft, careful, and young. "Hi. I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Alina Ray. I think..." I think I might be your ex-husband's granddaughter. Marius Calden? I didn't say anything. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in so long, it felt foreign. I waited. I found your name in an old family photo album, she continued. My mom, her name's Hope. She's your ex-husband's daughter from his second marriage. We're having a family reunion next month, and I know you weren't invited the first time, but I wanted to reach out. I wanted to ask if you might consider coming. I heard the hesitation in her voice, the uncertainty. But what struck me most was that she sounded sincere, not guilty, not defensive, just curious, just human. She didn't know the whole story. Of course she didn't. She wasn't there when the lights were cut off and I had to boil water over the stove for the kids' baths. She wasn't there the night I walked 2 miles through snow to get to work because I had $23 left in my bank account. She didn't know what it cost to hold a family together with nothing but a mop and a prayer. I asked for her address. There was a long pause. Then she gave it to me. I hung up, walked to the hall closet, and pulled out the mop, the same one I had used for over a decade. The handle was still wrapped in black tape where it had splintered once during a fall. I cleaned it years ago and kept it for reasons I couldn't explain, maybe because it was the one thing that had never left me, never failed me, never asked for more than I had. I laid the mop on the kitchen table and took a photo of it. Nothing dramatic, just honest, just the truth. Then I took out a small card and wrote a single sentence. This built your bloodline. I mailed it that same afternoon. 3 days later, I received a letter, handwritten, folded carefully. Alina's handwriting was neat, rounded at the edges, just like Sari's had been when she was young. She wrote. I showed my mom the photo. She didn't say anything at first. Then she started crying. She said she remembered a woman named Alara who raised her half-siblings when their father walked away. She said you were the reason they turned out good. I want you to know, I get it now. I didn't before, but I do now. And I want to thank you. We would still love to have you come. Not because of Marius, but because we want to know you. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and tucked it into my drawer. I didn't go to the reunion. I didn't need to. Instead, I drove to Leora's house and sat with her on her porch. She poured me a cup of coffee and asked how my day was. I told her about the letter. I told her about Alina. She listened closely, nodding. You're not going, are you? She asked. No, I said. That door closed a long time ago. Good, she said. But still, that mop thing? That was ice cold, Mom. That was the hardest mic drop I've ever seen. I smiled. It wasn't meant to hurt anyone. I just wanted her to know the truth. Leora leaned back in her chair and laughed softly. She knows. Trust me. We all know. I watched the sky shift from pale blue to soft orange. I thought about all the years that had passed, all the silence, all the strength it took to keep moving. The man who left never looked back, but his granddaughter had. And that meant something. When I was younger, I believed closure was something people gave you. An apology, a confession, a last conversation. I thought it came wrapped in words. But life taught me something else. Closure is not a gift. It is a decision. You build it yourself, one quiet truth at a time. After Alina's letter, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not pride, just peace. It settled into my chest like a slow breath. I didn't need to attend the reunion. I didn't need to see Marius's face again. That chapter was sealed, not by a courtroom or a contract, but by every single day I chose to stay standing when walking away would have been easier. Weeks after the letter, I received a second envelope in the mail. Inside was a photo. It showed Alina standing in front of a family quilt, hung behind a folding table at the reunion. Pinned to the corner of the quilt was the printed photo of my mop, laminated and captioned with the words, "The Foundation." Alina wrote one line on the back, They all asked about you. I showed it to Dax the next time he visited. He nodded, said nothing, but later I found the photo tucked into a frame in the hallway beside a picture he had taken years ago, the one of me through the kitchen window. He had paired them together like they belonged. Time doesn't erase everything. There are still days when I look at the space across the dinner table and remember what was lost. I still wake up early out of habit, expecting the hum of fluorescent lights and the squeak of a mop bucket. Sometimes I hear Sari telling her students that stories can heal you. Sometimes I see Leora helping a patient sit up in bed, speaking with the same gentle firmness I once used on her. Sometimes I read Dax's interviews, and I catch a sentence that sounds like something I said once when the lights were out, and we were holding everything together with tape and courage. They remember, not just the struggle, but the strength. That is what matters to me most. One Sunday morning, I went to the town park and sat beneath a maple tree that had been planted the year Marius left. I brought a thermos of tea and my old copy of Jane Eyre, the one with underlined sentences and worn edges. I watched a group of young women set up folding chairs nearby. They were hosting a women's support meeting. One of them was holding a sign that read, "You can start again." I wanted to walk over and tell them what I knew, that starting again is never one big moment. It's 100 small ones. It's a daughter brushing your hair while your back aches. It's a child handing you a peanut butter sandwich after a shift. It's choosing to work through the bitterness and turn it into something your children can stand on. It's sending a mop in the mail because you have nothing to prove and everything to show. That's what I want people to understand. The real legacy isn't who stayed. It's who kept going, who cleaned up the mess, who fed the children, who got up again and again when no one was clapping. That's where the real history is made. I didn't build my life out of spite. I built it out of love. I cleaned those buildings because I loved my children. I didn't mop floors so someone would praise me. I did it so they would never go to bed afraid. When I think about Alina now, I don't feel resentment. I feel gratitude. She reached out. She asked a question most people spend their whole lives avoiding, and she gave me the chance to tell the truth, quietly, fully, without apology. That truth lives in my children, in their kindness, in their strength, in the way they hold each other up. I am not the woman whose husband left her. I am the woman who stayed for her children, who worked until her hands bled, who turned silence into structure and pain into purpose. This life was not handed to me. I built it, with a mop, a key ring, and the kind of love that never quits. And if I had to do it all again, I would. Every floor, every night, every sacrifice, because they were worth it. And so was I. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone in your life who carried everything on their shoulders and still kept going, take a moment to share it with them. Stories like this aren't just about pain. They're about power, about the strength it takes to keep a family together when everything else falls apart. Leave a comment below and tell me, who built your bloodline? Who cleaned the floors, packed the lunches, stayed up through the tears, and never gave up? And if you believe stories like Ilara's deserve to be heard, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. That's how we keep lifting up voices that often go unheard. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you stayed until the end. See you in the next story.